fight is different. Our strength is not our own. Come on, let your heart sing this out. Say, I just want you and nothing else, and nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, and nothing else.
Welcome to another episode of Heated Conversations. I'm your host, Peterson Pierre. Super excited that you tuned into this episode. I am excited just because this is the first time I've done a live episode with someone in studio. We have youth pastor at Tree of Life Church that's based in New Braunfels, Texas, as well as basketball coach of ProSkills that's based in San Antonio. Welcome to the podcast, Pastor Dave Miller.
Nothing else will do. Sing, I just want you. You're my heart's desire. I just want you. I just want you. Nothing else.
How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you joining the podcast today. You know, when I first moved here, we kind of connected, right?
Yeah.
Just because in the area that we're in, especially in New Braunfels, there's not a lot of people that are our color, right? And even going into our church, yet it is somewhat diverse. We connected because we were part of the worship ministry together, right? And then we come to find out that we both were in sports and we're from the Midwest. You're originally from Detroit,
Yep.
right? Can you kind of talk about growing up in Detroit?
It was cold, extremely cold. But had a pretty good upbringing, but also a pretty rough upbringing at the same time. Grew up in this my parents divorced when I was 6 or 7 years old. And my mom didn't remarry until I was like 13. And so, all of those, years in middle school and elementary and, all of that was just my mom, my brother, and I. And the thing that pretty much saved my life was my mom keeping my brother and I in sports. Yeah, we still did some, some things and was still involved in the streets, but it was basketball for me that, that kind of, again, saved my life.
And we'll kind of talk about those things. And I love that how you mentioned that, your family and stuff like that. And what, those things were important, how your mom was like a cornerstone. Now I have a couple of questions that kind of connect, yourself to either your family or even people that are, your loved ones and stuff like that. So I have two questions, and these are kind of intro questions. The first question is, if you could have anyone cook you a meal, who would you have cook you that meal, and what would you have them make you?
That's a good one. I'd probably say my grandmother, my grandma Connie. And then the meal that I would have her to cook, any meal, just because I miss her. She passed away when I was, I think 16, 15, 16. And I was a grandma's baby. So.
Yeah, and kind of talk about your relationship with your grandma and what significance she was to you, and even talk about those times where she made meals and you're either at her house or she came over to your house to kind of share that fellowship with you.
Yeah, so one of the things my grandmother used to always say was she used to tell everybody that I was her baby because when I was born, the doctors didn't hand me to my mom, they handed me to her. And so she would always say, I was the first person that you looked in my eyes. And so we just had this bond, all throughout my, my younger years. And then when we were in school, excuse me, my mom worked a couple jobs. And so my brother and I would go over to her house after we got out of school. So we spent a lot of time, with my grandmother, a lot of dinner and a lot of lunch and a lot of everything. And she was amazing. She was amazing. So.
And I think food is a great time for us to be able to connect with people, especially our
Absolutely.
loved ones, right?
Yep.
Our grandparents, our parents, and even just having a special bond, like you said, that you have with your grandma, being the first one to hold you when you
Yeah.
came out of the womb, to look into her eyes, and it not just be for that moment, but something that lasted until her life on earth,
Yep.
you know. And I think those are things that we cherish, right? And it kind of leads me to my second question. Us being kind of in music, right? If you could see anybody live in concert, dead or alive, who would you want to go see, and who would you take with you?
Um, I'd probably say Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, of course, I mean, I think everybody grew up loving Michael Jackson during that era. I never got to see him live or anything. Everything was just all TV and movies and different stuff like that. So I think it would have been really cool to see Michael Jackson live. And probably my son, because my son had the same kind of love for Michael Jackson when he was growing up. So I think that would be pretty cool.
I'm with you on that. I grew up dancing to Michael Jackson and watching his stuff, moonwalking and learning how to
Yeah.
glide. And then obviously you see the other ones who kind of follow in their footstep, and like Chris Brown
Hmm.
and Usher and stuff like that, and took it to a different level. But for a lot of us, we see Michael Jackson kind of being that figure that really taught us how to dance, how to move, right? And really how to allow music to be something that we can really express ourselves through dancing.
Yeah.
And being able to share that also with your son, which he also is a basketball player that you get to coach, right? And
Yep.
and I think it's cool how music, food really connects us as family, right? And then also you've been talking about music.
Mhm.
Your daughter is also involved in music,
She
right?
is.
Can you kind of talk about how you guys are bonded through music, and what type of music are you guys doing? Are you guys singers? Do you guys play anything? And kind of when did it start for you being a musician or singer? And then how did you get your daughter involved?
For me, I my mom would always tell me that I started singing probably when I was like 3 or 4 years old, and would just I remember the specific song that I used to sing. I don't know what the song was. I just remember what I used to say when I sung it. And so it kind of started for me pretty young, and then my mom did a lot of traveling in Detroit, singing with different community choirs and stuff like that. So I was always around music, and I didn't really get into actually, like, my mom knew that I liked singing, but she didn't know that I actually could sing until probably, I think I was like seventh or eighth grade. And I started singing a little bit more. And she's like, wait a minute, like, you can really sing. And then I just kind of got a love for it, from that. And it was pretty much the same with my daughter. Like, she was, younger, and we of course, listened to a lot of music. Her godfather is a gospel recording artist, and so we used to listen to a lot of his stuff. And she would sing all of his music, and she knew all of the runs and the riffs and like everything. It was really cool sharing that with her, and then excuse me, and then noticing that she had like kind of the musical ear. And so she would I started having her like harmonize with me when she was like 3 years old, and she would be able to pick out notes, just from me doing it with her so much. And I would sing something and she would pick a harmony part, and she was like three years old. And I remember telling my wife, like, she's gonna be the singer, and she's amazing. I tell her all the time she's my favorite singer in the world, and she's already, more skilled than me as far as singing is concerned. And as long as she keeps honing that, she's got it. She's gonna be amazing.
And is it special having those bonds that you can share? Because sometimes we kind of share our kids' passions,
Mhm.
but it may not be our own passion. Where both of your kids have passions that are your passion, being one in basketball
Mhm.
and two in singing. And those are something for our viewers and audience doesn't really know, but you lead worship at the church, that you also are a um, young adults slash um, next gen, we call it,
Mhm.
pastor, which is kind of like a youth pastor, going from the mid 20s all the way down to the babies, right? And being able to share something special with both of them that you are passionate about. Can you kind of talk about having that uniqueness? Because not all parents may have that, where they share the exact same passions and can be involved actively
Yeah.
with their kids in that.
Yeah, it's actually a really cool thing for, for me, especially on the basketball side. I didn't have my father, grow up. I didn't grow up with my father showing me how to play basketball or even being around to, go to games and different things like that. And so it was really something in my heart that I always wanted to be able to do that with my kids, especially with my son. And then for him to really take a liking to basketball very early. In fact, I was looking at a video that I posted on Facebook. Well, actually, it was on Social Cam. I don't know if you remember Social Cam. It was like it was a social media thing like years ago. It came and it went away really fast. But I posted this video, and he was 4 years old at the time, and we were in behind our apartment complex, and I just had him dribbling the basketball and with his right hand and with his left hand at 4 years old, and just dribbling back and forth, back and forth. And he started to have this love for it, and it actually started a little bit earlier than that when he was probably 2. And I got him a little basketball rim for my job, and he would sit in his room and he would just keep throwing the basketball in the rim over and over and over again. He would sit there for like an hour, just doing the same thing over and over again. Then he got this. I could tell early that he really had this love for the game of basketball. I didn't push it on him. I didn't force it on him. And now, even now, I'm starting to see it, a lot more. And a lot of times, as parents, sometimes we can try to live vicariously through our kids,
Right.
and try to push them into things that maybe we wanted to do. And I've that was one thing that I didn't do, was I didn't want to push them into it if they didn't really like it. If they didn't really want it, I wanted it to be something that they kind of steered the ship rather than me pushing them and forcing them. And my son has been steering it. Like, he loves basketball, and I mean, he eats, sleeps. I mean, he really loves it. And then the same thing with my daughter. She likes basketball too, but for her, the singing, is one of the things that she had really grabbed a hold of, that her and I kind of share. And we did a video probably about maybe a year or two ago. I think it was during COVID. We did a live thing on Instagram, and we just sang songs and took some requests and different things like that. And it did pretty good. And it was something cool that her and I, could share. So
Yeah, because I remember during that time, Steph Curry kind of was doing that with a bunch of gospel artists as well as kind of CCM worship artists and stuff like that. And so it's
Yep.
kind of cool for us to be able to be at home and still see people's talents from
Yep.
within and allow, you know, to be able to express those things that we're truly passionate, right, about, where sometimes we're so used to doing it outside of our home and doing it, for others or other places like that. It was kind of cool, tuning into that and being a witness of you guys singing together as well as, individually singing. It's really cool to kind of see, especially with Ari. I get emotional over like arts
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And when someone really could sing well and that you could tell they love it, it really moves me.
Yeah.
And
Same.
and I you could say I'm an emotional person, right? Um, I'm passionate about the things that I do, you know. And so it's cool to kind of see those things being expressed in other people,
Yeah.
and even for me being a new father, just kind of seeing that and seeing what my daughter will eventually want to do and kind of connect with her on those type
Yep.
of things. And my wife is doing a great job kind of getting her already somewhat advanced. At this point she's 15 months, she can count to 10, she can,
Yeah.
you know
Wow.
call colors out that you just present to her.
Mhm.
She could hear different animal sounds and tell you exactly what it is. And in the mornings when she wakes up literally talking. If she's sleeping next to me and she wakes up in our bed, she'll be like, "Sleep, Dada, sleep." So like making those connections
Yeah.
is kind of cool. And I'm excited being, again, a newer father to kind of go on that journey.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned how you really didn't have your dad around.
Mhm.
Was that something for you? One, you were super intentional about how you wanted to be in your kids' lives. And two, was it traumatizing for you, especially growing up, maybe where you grew up, either seeing other people with their fathers, or even having people in the same scenario as you
Yeah.
where they didn't have their fathers around?
Well, I haven't had it pretty interesting, upbringing. My mom married my younger brother's father after I was born. I think I was like 6 or 7 months or something like that. Gave me his last name and raised me to know him as my dad. And so I didn't find out that he wasn't my real birth father until I was like 12. And then, when that moment hit, it was like just a flood of emotions, as you can imagine, of all the things that I missed out on because my dad, he didn't like basketball. So he wasn't at my games and different things like that. Um, and so like my mom tried to overcompensate, a lot and be, at a lot of things and different stuff like that. But it was like I didn't know my identity until I found out, oh, that's not my real dad. This is my father. Oh, and he liked basketball. Oh, he played basketball in high school. Oh, he went to college to play basketball. And this was his, so then it started to make a lot, more um a lot more sense. Um and then just kind of growing up and like knowing that side of or not knowing that side of who I was a little tough as I kind of got older, and then you can imagine frustration and why wasn't he there for this and he wasn't there for that and he didn't show up for my prom and different it's just like all of those different things, and of course you build up this anger and this this disdain for for him as a person, and it took decades to finally get some healing from that, and uh now we're on the other side of it and it's good, but it took a long time to get to that place.
No, and I think, it means a lot that you're able to kind of share that. And those are vulnerable times and vulnerable moments and vulnerable conversations to have.
Yeah.
Right. But also seeing kind of where you're at now, where you're leading our next generation towards, purpose and towards identity.
Yeah.
And can you talk about how your own story and your own testimony kind of drives and motivates what you do as a pastor now?
Yeah, so um like I remember for instance, when I finally like accepted Christ, I think I was probably like 13 or 14. And the youth minister at the time, his name was Dion Clark. He and I are still friends to this day. He's a pastor in Detroit. Um, and at this time, I was in gangs and I was just kind of really in the streets. And my mom just brought us to church, but he found out that I liked basketball. And so he would start taking, me and a couple of other boys out to parks, and we would go out to the park and we would play basketball. And after we finished playing basketball, he would pray with us, you know, and he would always ask us, hey, how's school going? And, hey, let's go play basketball again. And he would, get permission from, my mom, and she would always let me go. And, but the thing that he built this relationship with us because of this liking that we had with basketball. And that was kind of like his entryway into like our lives, into our hearts, and where he could, introduce Jesus to us and let us know, like, at this point, it's like, he's like, I lived the life that you live. I've done some of the things that you've done. And, the life I'm living now is a pretty good life. And I'm living this life in Jesus, and you can do it too. So it was like Dion was cool and he was saved. So it was like it wasn't weak to be saved because Dion wasn't weak. He was really cool. So it kind of helped bring me into a relationship, with Christ. So I always, when I look at youth now, and I tell even my youth leaders, like I always share that story with all of my youth leaders, that I still remember Dion when I was 13 years old, and I'm 40 years old now. And so you can be a Dion Clark to so many of these different kids that some, 20 years, 30 years down the line, they'll have a relationship with Christ, they'll have a family, they'll have this thriving life because you invested in them. You were their Dion, if you will, and you invested in them and you took a liking in the things that they liked, and you showed them not, you showed them what it meant to live for Jesus, not full of, legalism and rules and all of these different things, but like it's cool to live for Jesus and it's cool to have a relationship, with him, um, outside of the four walls of the church. And so that is kind of what drives me, is like, I want to be able to, I want to be for these teenagers what, Pastor Dion was for me. That, I am where I am today, partly because of his impact in my life. And I want to be able to be that for, some of these kids, knowing the things that I've grown up, in the city I grew up in, and, all of the things that I experienced, growing up in life. I want to help people, help some of these kids not make some of the same decisions and the choices, bad choices that I made, that they can still, they can live a great life, and they don't have to go down the path that everybody else goes down. They don't have to go down the path that I even, went down, that their life could be a whole lot different. Yeah, I'm where God wanted me to be, of course, but I took a whole different path, and it would have been a lot easier path if I did it his way, so I get a chance and the opportunity to help some of these students to learn how to do it his way, so to make that path so much easier. So
Yeah, no, and I think that's great. I mean, also being able to talk about with pro skills and doing it in basketball and having a church position, is it hard and difficult to be able to separate faith, or is that something you just intertwine with what you do and you're trying to teach these same principles to these young men that you're working with in San Antonio through pro skills? And is it something that you actively are presenting to them, or is it something you just kind of walk out and just be an example of what Jesus was to his disciples and to the people on earth when he was here, and what he calls us to do for those who are believers?
yeah, I think that's exactly it. I see it as, I don't have to wear the Bible on my sleeve. I carry it in my heart. And so it's like, it's who I am. It's not a separate life. It's not a separate person. This is who I am. And I don't have to, you know, like beat them over the head with, Jesus, and you need to go to church and you need to do this, because everybody has their own, background. They have their own religion. They have their own, relationships and different things like that. And I just live out what, the life of Jesus. And, I just try to live it before him. And it's really cool that, I never really, they don't call me Pastor Dave. They call me Coach Miller. They all know what I do. But when I'm on the basketball court, when I'm coaching them, I'm their coach, and I'm helping, steer them in that way. But I'm also trying to teach them life lessons at the same time. And I had one of my players, probably about a month ago now, reach out to me, and I hadn't seen him since the season ended in July. And he sent me a message about a month ago and just asked how my family was doing. This is a 15-year-old kid. He's like, I want to get closer to God. Is there a specific Bible that you think I should get and read? And that meant so much to me, because he wasn't messaging me asking me, hey coach, is there any drills that I can do, to get better? And I'm struggling on this area. I can't wait till the basketball season starts in the summer again. It was completely different, or separate from basketball. It was his life. And for him to reach out to me and let me know that I made some kind of impact in how I live. And I never, I never pushed Jesus to them in that sense, but it let me know that I made such an impact, that when he had this decision to do something different with his life, he knew who to contact. He knew that he can contact Coach Miller because of what he's seen. And again, I don't wear the Bible on my sleeve. I carry it in my heart.
And do you find it hard for athletes to really feel like they can do the same, especially in these days where we see, not necessarily just in these days, but when you're in school, especially public school, if you're not in private school, where faith may not be something that's as prevalent? Do you find that it's hard for, athletes to really bring that side of them, or do they feel like they have to conform to what's the norm or what society's doing, or even just the culture? Because I think with each sport, there's a certain culture that, goes along with it.
Yeah.
And do you find it difficult for these young men to be able to live that out and really comfortably say, hey, you know what, Pastor Dave, I feel like I need something more besides basketball. I feel like there is a purpose for what I'm doing, and if it's through basketball, you know, but I want to express my faith, but again, it's hard because maybe my peers may not be, or I'm afraid that my peers may think I'm weird.
Yeah.
And society's telling me this, social media is telling me this. I see that, the world is kind of gravitating towards this more than that. How do you kind of help them really navigate through that? And do you also see a lot of them struggling with those type of feelings?
Um, for me, it's definitely tough. It's definitely tough in this day and age. I mean, these kids deal with things that we didn't deal with growing up. Yeah, we dealt with some crazy stuff too, which was different than what our parents, dealt with growing up. And so everything is changing. The society is changing. The way to do things wrong or bad is changing. Everything is changing. Culture is changing, and then what's accepted and what's not accepted is changing. And so what I personally do, and I mean, it starts for me, it starts at home with my kids, with my son, is helping them to build confidence in who they are. And when you have a confidence in you and who you are, then it doesn't matter what other people say, you're still going to be who you are, you know. And so I teach them that through basketball. And like a lot of my players, they always tell me like, thank you for believing me and believing in me. Thank you for helping me get confidence. And a lot of my players before they came to me, they didn't have confidence, and then they play with me, and now all of a sudden they have this confidence. And it's not anything that I'm doing special. I'm just showing these kids that I believe in them. And if I can show them that I believe in them, that somebody believes in them, then eventually they'll begin to believe in themselves, you know. And so help them to understand the confidence and believing who they are as a player, as a basketball player. And then intertwining those, I'll bring up life lessons and I'll let them know, hey, this is what you have to carry on, in your life. You know what I mean? If you can't handle adversity here, you've got to learn to handle adversity here, and it's going to help you to handle adversity out there. Because when you get out there, you will remember, I remember that time when it was tough. I remember that time when I maybe, I was playing really well and I sprained my ankle, and then I had to figure out a way how to still be productive and still be effective even with this injury. And that's a life lesson. Like there's going to be times in your life where you're going to things aren't going to go well. Things may be going well, and then something happens. Maybe there's some kind of pain or sickness or injury or death in the family or something, and you have to figure out a way to still be effective. You still got to figure out a way to be productive and still live life. Even with this thing going on, you've got to figure out a way to make it happen. And so I kind of bring in some life lessons in those things and help them to understand to be themselves at all times. It doesn't matter. You're going to always be who you are. Whenever you show up, the first thing that shows up with you is you.
Yeah.
And who you are, your character. And that's the thing that matters the most. And so I'm always telling them those things, and letting them be who they are.
Yeah.
And I think that gives them the confidence to just do that everywhere. Like my son carries so much confidence, like borderline arrogant, but he carries his confidence because like he knows who he is, and I helped him to understand you're an influencer, you know, you're a leader. And we've been telling our kids that since they were, babies. You're a leader, you're not a follower. Everywhere you go, you're going to lead. And so when they were, Naraya's age, we were praying those things and speaking those things over them. And so now they walk through their high school campus, and everybody knows who they are. And everybody, you'll hear like people doing things that they do and saying things that they say. It's because they carry this influence and they're leaders. And so I just try to instill that in all of my players. I know that was a roundabout way to answer that, but
No, I think it's good because I think being able to give a full view of that is super important, because sometimes it is hard, right? And with kids, they're always looking for credibility. They're
Mhm.
always looking for proof, right? And even with faith, I think one of the things is even the Bible talks about to test God,
Yeah.
right? And to seek it out, right? And to know that what someone is saying, it's worthwhile. Because if people find out that you're fake, then they're going to be frustrated
yeah.
about that, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to be authentic and real, but also have credibility is important. what are some of the things that kind of give you credibility, especially with basketball, in your own journey? Did you do basketball as a young kid? You kind of mentioned that a little bit, but how far did you go, and how do you use that to be able to impact these kids? Because I know everybody has different journeys. I know myself with gymnastics, I wasn't a gymnastics coach, or I wasn't a gymnast growing up, and I didn't have any real experience. So if I was starting off and I said, "Hey, I haven't done this sport," people would be like, "Why should I listen to you?"
Right.
Right? So can you kind of talk about your journey and your credibility, especially with you coaching at ProSkills?
So I played in high school, uh, played in college, and these are some of the things that I share with, my players, too, how, everything matters, and the decisions you make. And I got to college and made some bad decisions, and, I was done with basketball because of my decisions, my grades. And then I, pledged in the fraternity, and, and my life just went more towards that. And I still play basketball recreationally. And then when I got out of college, I got into a semi-pro league, and then I played semi-pro for a couple years before I moved out of Michigan. And then I got into coaching when I was down in Charlotte. And so, being able to share some of those things, the kids understand, and then also being able to show them, because I can still play. So they can see, oh man, coach can actually play. Oh, coach can actually shoot. And I'll do things in practice with them, like I'll have a shooting contest. Like if they beat me, they don't have to run at the end of practice, and I'm always doing those kind of things just to kind of have fun. And then they can see, as I'm coaching, they see things unfold that I tell them that's going to happen, because I know the game, and I've played the game, and I've studied the game, and I love the game of basketball. And so, like, I can tell you what's going to happen because it's basketball. Like, things don't, I mean, it's pretty much the same. And if you have basketball IQ, you know that this thing is going to happen. And if you do this, this is going to happen. If you make that pass, this is going to open up. And if like all of those different things. And so they start to see some of those things changing, and they can see that when I'm training them, when I'm doing drills with them, that I do know what I'm talking about. It's not just I'm just I just picked this thing up and it's because my son's playing. Like, I just want to be the dad coach. No, like, I actually know what I'm talking about, and they understand that, and they see it, and then they see the results of their game as a result of it. I had one kid. He was probably one of the if I had 9 players, he was like my 10th guy. Like, he was on his way out. If I got another guy that was better than him, he would have been gone. And I had this conversation with him and let him know that. And so he asked me, he was like, "Well, coach, what do I have to do? What do I need to do?" And so I told him, like, all the things that he needed to do. This is what you need to work on. You need to get stronger. You need to do this thing. You need to do that thing. And I remember all the things that I told him to do. His mom came back to me and she said, "Do you know, for Christmas, all he wanted was everything that Coach Miller said for him." And in like 3 months, this kid went from being the last man on my team to one of the best players on our team, because he took what I said, he put it into practice, and he actually did it. And now he's a sophomore, his same age as my son. He's a sophomore. He's starting on his varsity team. I went and watched him play yesterday. He's probably one of the best shooters in San Antonio, because I saw that this kid he can actually shoot the basketball. He just needs confidence. And so I would just tell him all the time, shoot the ball, shoot the ball. He would miss it. He would keep missing. He would keep missing. And I always ask him this question. Even now, he knows. And I'll say, "Rich," his name's Rich. "Rich, what do shooters do?" He say, "Shoot." And that's all I have to say. If he misses a couple shots, I can see him getting his head. And I'll say, "Rich, what do shooters do?" "Shoot." All right. And then he'll go out and he'll make 6 more, make 6 after missing 4, you know. And so they know that I know what I'm talking about, because they don't have to see videos, because we didn't have, a lot of that footage. And some of my videos from my semi-pro, my uncle has them, and I can't get them, but they know I know what I'm talking about because they can see it, and they see the results of it.
And how rewarding is it to kind of see them go through those things and be able to understand that if I actually, you know, are keen to the advice that someone who's cares about me and I do it and see the success out of it, how rewarding is it for you as a coach and even as a parent if you see it done from your kids?
Oh, it's extremely rewarding. You know, it's I mean, I think that's just with I think that's with life, you know, in general. And I never approach any of these kids and even my own son from a standpoint of I know everything, you need to listen to me. You know, not I never approach it that way. I look at each one of these kids individually, and after coaching them and after seeing them play enough, and it's kind of like some life stuff too. Like I know what they're capable of doing. I know what their strengths are. I know what their weaknesses are, and I push them towards those things, you know, and push them to help to strengthen their weaknesses. And when they actually get a hold of it and grab it, it's like, man, that's like a super rewarding thing. My son last year, or I'm sorry, earlier this year, probably like maybe February or March. I remember him saying this conversation. I picked him up from practice one day, and he was upset because he was like 6, 7 man at the time on the freshman team, and he was upset. And he gets in the car, he slams the door, and I'm like, "What are you slamming the door for?" He was like, "I'm tired of being mediocre." And so I was glad that he said that because I had been telling him that, you know, and he said, "I'm tired of being mediocre." And I said, "Okay, so what are you going to do about it?" The only person that can change from either you being mediocre or being great is you. No one can change that but you. No one can make you stay mediocre except you. So if you're going to be anything better than mediocre, then you've got to put the work in. And you've got to study, you've got to work hard. That was the last conversation I had with him. And just like it was like overnight, it clicked. And he started working and working and working. And from the end of his basketball season in, you know, March, and then of course we had our AAU season to when this school season picked up in August, all the coaches were like, well, who is this kid? Like, what happened? What did you do over the summer? And it was just that grind. He started to grind, and that was rewarding to me because he heard it and he understood that okay, now basketball is not like any other sport. You know, every sport has its own thing. You're going to get out of it what you put in. You can't just show up and think you're going to be great. You've got to put in some work, you know, and that's life too. It's like it's life as a believer, as a Christian. You ain't just there's some things that come, you know, along with just being a believer. But if you're going to live a life like Christ wants you to live, you got to put some work in. You got to build your relationship, and you got to pray, and you got to study, and you got to read. How do I become a better Christian? It's the same thing with basketball. How do I become a better player? Well, I've got to watch YouTube videos, and I'm going to do drills, and I'm going to shoot, and I'm going to do. You got to put that time in. So it was really cool for him and for some, you know, my other players too, to actually grab a hold of that, and you see it and you see the results of it because they actually took heed to what you said.
And I know, some of the greatest basketball players that we would see super talented, like Kobe, like Ray Allen, in regard to a shooter, right? Steph Curry. Some of them talk about how they don't believe in talent, where we would just think they were just born with that it factor. And we forget that they probably spent many, many hours putting in that hard work.
Yep.
If you ever look on YouTube and you listen to any of Kobe's interviews or even him talking about his regimen, seemed like he would be training from 4 in the morning, right? So that means you're waking up at minimum maybe 3,
Yep.
And he's training almost like every 2 hours, right? And he talks about how he exponentially got ahead of everyone doing that, where sometimes we would just think it's just natural. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't. Where some people do that, right? But at some point, it catches up to them. Now, is that something that you believe in yourself, that talent is really something that doesn't exist? Or is it something that does exist and people just build upon it? Or is it something that you just need to work at in general, where, in the Bible talks about gifts, like we have gifts. Maybe we have a gift of playing basketball and have to develop it.
Yeah.
Or is it just a talent versus not talent, and someone who works hard versus not hard?
I think I definitely think talent exists, you know. I mean, there's there's some people that probably will never pick up a basketball because they're just like, that's just not for me, you know. They're gifted in other areas, but I definitely think talent exists, but it's something that you have to build on. You know, it can't just be talent. There are some people that are naturally athletic, you know, and it could be genetics, it could be whatever, you know, you want to, the science is behind it. There's some people that just have good genes and they have these things, and they're taller and they're faster, and they have muscle structure that, you know, that the next person doesn't have, that they've got to work, you know, a little bit harder for. But it still doesn't negate the work. Like, you've got to put that work in. I remember that video you're talking about with Kobe. You know, it's just his work ethic was just unmatched. Like, nobody was gonna outwork him. Nobody was gonna work harder than he did, and it showed. You know, he's one of the greatest to ever play the game, not because he's just Kobe Bryant and he just showed up and he had talent. No, because of the work that he put in over and over and over, and he was consistent with it over and over and over and over again, and he became great because of that. And even if it was just a short time, you know, the the things that were unseen is what made him great when everybody saw him, you know. And I think it's like, it's kind of like with Jesus, you know. We don't know what happened from the moment Jesus is in the, you know, in the temple and 12 years old when he's teaching, until he pops up and John the Baptist baptizes him at 30. Those unseen years, I believe, is what made Jesus great in those 3 years that, you know, that he did his ministry. It wasn't the 3 years of ministry that we saw that was like, oh, Jesus is great. It's, there was time and dedication, and there was so much, I believe, that Jesus did in those 18 years that nobody saw. You know, time spent in prayer, time spent in his relationship with God, and time studying. And, you know, I believe there was a whole lot that Jesus did, that when he showed up in those 3 years, now we see the fruit of those 18 years of being unseen. And so I think it's those unseen moments, the things that people see that people don't see, that make you who you are. I saw this thing, and I'll say that this will be the last thing I'll say. I saw this post, and it said, you don't show up to practice to show a coach that you practice. You show up to practice to show a coach what you did when you weren't at practice, you know, that you've been working on your game. So it's not like I just show up and I practice, but I'm showing up to practice to prove to the coach what I did, what I've been doing when he wasn't looking, you know. And those are the things that I think a lot of, you know, players and don't understand at this point. But when they grab a hold of it and they get it and it clicks, you know. And that's just life in general. When people grab a hold of the time and the dedication it takes to cultivate, you know, whatever gift you may have, you know, it takes time to be great at it. You can be mediocre, or you can be great. And if you're going to be great, you're going to have to put some time in, you know.
And I love that you use that as a parallel. That was a great parallel, you know, between what Christ did and what we didn't see, and times where we see these greats at their prime or at the time when they're shining, but also we don't see what happened in between. And I think the one thing too with that is having certain names, right? If you say Kobe Bryant or if you say Michael Jordan, it comes with a certain type of prestige. It comes with a certain type of reputation or impression, right? Based off of name, but also how certain names, even though that they move down, and we talk about that, like, you know, a lot of times you have to say you have kids, right? You're trying to leave a legacy, and you leave a legacy through your name of the things that you do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always mean that, you know, say even with Kobe, say the Bryant name started with him and it didn't with his parents, and it doesn't, he has daughters now and it doesn't continue with them, where how each individual has to build their own name,
Yeah.
right? And be able to go and prove for themselves how to do things, right? Where there's not always that transfer that happens, even with, I think, families that may have grown up with either wealth or opportunities.
Yeah.
The ones who are underneath, in order for it to continue, they have to understand and learn the skills or be able to operate, because there was a teaching that happened
Yep.
in order for certain names to continue, right? We know, certain names, at least in society where you hear them over, that may be involved with certain things in the world, right? Just because they pass down that legacy. And being able to really tell your athletes, or even tell young ones, you can be whoever you want to, well, you can be the true you and create a name for yourself, right? But it doesn't always mean that it may live on, even though you may want it to, right? There's an intentional work that someone has to see being done and have to adopt the same principles, right? And the comparison game that always happens is, a lot of times if we see an athlete who's similar, you talked about this athlete Rich, right? People could say, hey, he shoots it like Steph Curry. But again, what's his name? His name is Rich, right? It's not Steph Curry, but we do that all the time.
Yep.
We always give somebody else's name just because of similar characteristics, which I think can be a disservice, right? Because again, you want to have your own name. I don't want to be known as a Steph Curry, not really look-alike, but clone, right? I want to be myself.
Right.
If I'm going to be a great shooter, I want to be known for a great shooter because of the things that I can do. Yes, I have learned things from other people, right?
Yeah.
I've learned things from Steph Curry. I've learned things from Ray Allen. I've learned things from some of the greatest shooters that created my style. But again, I don't want to go and be over there and on the back of my jersey say Steph Curry part 2.
Yeah.
Right? And so can you kind of also talk about how you coach each individual as an individual, rather than really playing that comparison game and saying, hey, you are like this person, you are like this person, and really teaching them how to have their own identity?
Yeah, I think like one of the things I don't do when I'm coaching is I don't compare them to other players. I don't say, well, you could be like this, you know. I just try to highlight who they are and help them to be stronger in that. You know what I mean? And so like if I know like one of my kids, one of my players, he's, really, really, really great at defense. And his defense turns into his offense. And so he'll try to go out because DJ may have got a couple shots and to fall, and then he goes and he tries to do the same thing, and it doesn't happen that way. And it's just like, hey, that's not who you are. Don't try to be him. I just need you to be you. And if you be you, we're gonna be fine. And if everybody can just be who you are, then we're gonna be fine. I don't need you to score 20 points. I just need you to be you. I don't need you to try to block every shot. I just need you to be you. I don't need you to try to make the flashy pass or anything like that. I just need you to be you. And if everybody can be who they're supposed to be, we're going to be fine. Whether we win or lose, the whole goal is to get you to be who you're supposed to be. And if you get like some of all of my games, after the game is over, if we lose a game or if we win a game, I always ask each of my players, did you give 100%? Yes, sir. Did you give 100%? No. Did you give 100%? No. Did you get? And I'll go all around and I'll ask all of them, did you give everything that you could? What if this was the last time you were going to play the game and you didn't give everything that you could? Could we have won this game if everybody gave everything that they could? Could we have, would the outcome of this game have been different? And so I approach it from that standpoint, and I coach each of them individually based on my relationship with them, based on how long they've been with me. I don't show favoritism, but there are some kids that like I can go a bit harder on my son because he's my son. But I'm not gonna go as hard on this kid because I know this kid is really just here to play, just to have fun. He's not really gonna go, he doesn't really want to play beyond high school. He's just having fun right now. So I'm gonna coach him, but I'm not gonna give him the same energy that I'm gonna give this kid over here who's really, really, really trying. I'm gonna help you be the player that you are. I'm going to help you because ultimately I want to help you be a better man. Later on in life, you're going to be a better man because of this moment that we had together. And so I coach each of them individually based on, you know, not based on their talent level, but based on their commitment, based on their level of belief in me as their coach. and how much they allow me to, to coach them, through the good times and through the bad.
And that's one thing I think as a coach that I say to my own athletes is before I really invest into a athlete, one, they first have to give me permission to do so, or else they're going to get frustrated because they don't want to hear from me anyways. If I don't have any authority that they gave me in their life, I'm just an annoyance to them.
Yep.
Right? Maybe it was their parents' decision to put them somewhere, but and it happened to be in front of me. That athlete has to decide what you're going to tell me is going to be important for me to pay attention to listen to, and to try to do.
Yeah.
Right. And being able to communicate those things are super important. And I think you make a great point as well, as you're meeting each athlete where they are and their desires are, and not trying to push your own desires upon them, because then it becomes frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to do something that they don't want. And now you're dragging someone through the ground that, again, wants you to let go of their hand and let them do what they want to do.
It
So
frustrates me in the process too.
exactly, right? And so being able to have that maturity, but also having that sense of understanding as a coach can be difficult, right? And it can be super frustrating because, one, sometimes you have the people who have the most talent don't have the desire, right? And again, if you don't understand that, then it can be frustrating because you're like, you're wasting it. But again, it's their life. It's not for you to decide, right? It's for them to decide. And once they've decided and they said that, hey, I want you to be a part of that impact, then you go and say, all right, these are the things that you do. Just like Rich, right? He asked you for advice, and he asked for permission for you to speak into his life. And he went out and did something about it. If he didn't, and you just said, hey, Rich, I need you to do this, 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 and this, and this, and he was just like, bro, are you serious? Like, I don't want to hear from you. Imagine, right? He may not be in the position that he is today, right? And he has to ultimately live with that decision. And he knows if he really has the passion inside, but has a front because of whatever reason, it may be he's insecure, or that his peer group may think what he does is sorry and he's being impacted by that, or maybe there's things that we don't know that's happening outside of basketball, or whatever, things we can't see that happen at home. You kind of mentioned you're involved with gangs and stuff like that, or having a situation where you may not have had a parental figure that you wanted, or finding out that a parental figure that you thought was supposed to be blood related wasn't, and those emotions and stuff like that, we don't know. Right. And being able to help them navigate through those things, I think, is super important.
Absolutely.
And can you, as we kind of wrap this up, talk about how faith can be demonstrated in sports in a way, especially in the area that we're in, but also in a way to be able to help others, outside of just really the sport, and in a way where it can be comfortable to do, right? Because again, you mentioned you don't wear your faith on your sleeve, it's in your heart. So can you talk about ways that young athletes or young people in general can do that and walk that out and be the light that we're called to be?
Yeah, I think so. Like for me, the way that I show my players, um, it's like John Maxwell says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I try to show all of my players that I care about them as a person, like beyond what you do as a basketball player. Like I don't get anything out of this. I'm not getting paid for this. I don't like I get to spend time with my son, but I'm not looking for anything out of this. I'm not looking for a pat on the back, I'm doing this just because I want to invest in you, you know. And so I show them that I care. And because I show them that I care, it helps me, it opens up the door for me to have other conversations with them and help them to establish character, and one of the other things I do is I don't cuss at my players. They do not hear me cuss at all because I don't have to. Like I can tell you exactly what I want to tell you without using that, that kind of language. I don't have to do that to get you to do what I need you to do. You know, and the other thing is I don't demean them. I don't talk down to them. You know, I don't talk bad about them or anything like that. Everything, now I'm going to correct them, but then I'm going to come along on the other side of it and I'm going to build them back up. And then on the back side of it, I show them like, this is what God does to us. Like, he doesn't just like life is over for us because you made a mistake. Like, you made one mistake, get out of here. You know, and a lot of times, sometimes as coaches, we do that. Like, you made that mistake, man, come sit down.
Right.
Just up.
Yeah.
You know, but then giving them opportunity to, you know, opportunity to go back. And so they see that it's not like church is not just something that I do. It's something that, you know, my relationship with Christ is who I am. So I try to model good character and I try to model being a good person, you know, before them. Um, because, you know, I mean, if we allow, you know, the Bible and our relationship with Christ to change our character, it helps us to be, you know, a better person. And so it's not something that I'm just saying, it's something that I'm actually just as someone that I'm actually being, because I'm allowing my character and I'm allowing not my bad nature, if you will, to be changed. Um, and so I get to live that out in front of them, you know, as well. And I get to help them that if they blow up in a game, you know, I get to help them to understand why that's not okay and how to do differently the next time. And then you start to see that, and then I help them to understand the correlation between what I'm trying to teach you here in basketball and what, you know, what I also want you to understand in life. It's the same lesson, you know, it's just a different playing field. And so helping them understand, you can extract these lessons that you're learning here about being a good person, about being a good player, and you can move that and use those same principles and lessons here in life. The same thing that I'm telling you, to be yourself. Don't worry about what other people are saying, you know, on the sidelines, on the court. Just be who you are. And if you just be you as a player, you're going to do great, and help them to understand. Don't worry about what people are saying at school. You just be you. People are going to like you for just being who you are. You don't have to try to be like anyone else. You don't have to try to put on this facade that you're something that you're not. Just be you, and people will like that. You know, and so I just try to live out Bible concepts, if you will, or biblical principles without telling them. I just live it out. And then that helps them, because people say I mean, you probably heard it say that people, they see you before they hear you. And so if they see me living it out, and if they see how I respond, you know, to a ref having a, you know, making a bad call, you know, if I see me blow up, and then they're gonna think that that's okay, and, you know, an okay behavior. So I even have to make sure that I'm governing myself in that, you know. And I tell them all the time, don't worry about the refs. Let me deal with the refs. Yeah. You know, you just play the game of basketball, because that's what you can do. I can't play the game. I can talk to the refs. You can play the game. And so we're all going to do our job. And if we all do our job, we're going to be fine. But again, I just try to live out those biblical principles to them and help them to have the courage to do the same, to just be a good person, you know, if you will, and allow God to conform you into who he wants you to, you know, wants you to be.
No, and I think it's great. You know, people like yourself are really changing the world, you know, changing, and it starts really in your communities and being able to make impact, because as these kids that you're coaching go out to different parts of the world and taking these principles, just like you had mentioned, Dion Clark was for you. You met him in Michigan, and now you're all the way here in Texas, and you had some time in North Carolina, and being able to have the impact. Now imagine where that goes.
Yeah.
And having the confidence to just do that and to face whatever life may throw at you with confidence, knowing that you have a savior who really cares for you. You have a God that really loves you, and that he has your back no matter what you may face, right? Um, you know, kind of as we're wrapping up, I have one kind of question, and then I want you to kind of finish off by whatever nuggets that you have for the viewers, the listeners, and you can just look in that camera and kind of talk to them. But what is your favorite basketball team? You know, growing up in Detroit, are you a Pistons fan? And do your kids, because I know both Ari and DJ, they play basketball, do they like the same team that you like?
So I am actually a Celtics fan. And growing up I was just a rebellious kid and I wanted to like everything that everybody didn't, I wanted to do the opposite. And when I was growing up, it was the Boston and Pistons rivalry was like really big. And so everybody liked the Pistons, and I was just like that again, a rebellious kid. Well, I like the Celtics, and it started off as this thing of rebellion, but I started to really, really, really like the Celtics, and I still like them to this day. My kids don't like the Celtics. They are Warriors fans, and so, um, and I think it's more so because of Steph Curry and when Kevin Durant was there too. But they're Warriors fans.
And I think a lot of the times as we see the teams that are successful, when we really start to engage with certain sports, is the teams that we tend to like, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it is geographical to where we are, just because one, it runs in our family, and if it's a college, our family went there, and it's just tradition.
Yep.
But also I think it can be where, like you said, it's something you just want to choose the opposite, or like I first mentioned, it's whatever team is having success when I'm really engaging. And probably at the time when your kids were really engaging with the sport, that's the team that was really winning, right? It's
Yeah.
either them or it was LeBron and whatever team he was a part of, just because he made so many finals in a row with different teams, and it's easy obviously with LeBron just because he's currently the best player in the world in for a long time, and so a lot of people may like him no
Yeah.
matter where he goes. And so it's kind of cool to talk about those things, that you may not always have the same um, teams that you like in the same household, but I think it makes it fun and unique and competitive, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to leave with the listeners, the viewers, to kind of talk about a little bit more about who you are, or just anything you want them to really get out of this conversation or in life?
Um, the biggest thing for me is just to be an impact, to be an impact in someone's life because I'm sure that most people that are watching this are probably coaches or probably in sports, different things like that. We all have an opportunity to impact somebody, whether it's a 10-year-old, whether it's a 16-year-old, or whether you're in college and it's a 20 or 21-year-old. We have an opportunity to make an impact. And we have, like, all of us are on this little journey or on this little blip in someone's journey, you know, and we have an opportunity to make sure that that little blip is a super, super, super impactful, positively impactful part of their journey. I tell my parents, for all of the students that I get to lead at Tree of Life, that I'm honored to be a part of their village, you know, and us as coaches, we're part of these parents' village, that it takes a village to raise a child, and that's the old adage. And so we get to be a part of that, and we get to be a Deion Clark for a young boy that, may not have a dad or may not have, or a young girl who's, just needs somebody to believe in her. We get to be that for someone. So go out and make an impact.
Well, I appreciate you for being on the podcast and kind of talking about those things and kind of bringing a different world to this podcast, because most of the episodes are related to gymnastics or related to things that could impact really gymnastics, if it's either mental blocks, or if it's physical therapy, if it's um, how to run faster, and I like that we're doing one that is about life, because at the end of the day, no matter what any of these episodes that we're doing, that's really what we're diving into.
Yep.
We're diving into life, and we're diving into people, and those are the things that are super important, right? And as AI kind of comes out and stuff like that, it still needs people.
Yep.
Even though those things can make life easier, the impact of people will never go away.
Right.
And so I appreciate you being on the podcast and being a part of this, and I'm excited for the people that this is going to reach and what God is going to do through this.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you all for tuning in to another episode of Heated Conversations. Remember to subscribe, to share, leave a comment. and also to like this. It's really important, I think, what we're doing to really help not only ourselves, our communities, but those around. And just like Pastor Dave was talking about, you don't have to walk with either faith or certain things on your sleeve. It's what's in your heart, and it's gonna come out. The Bible talks about what's in a man's heart flows out of them. And who you are inside is going to naturally flow out. So make sure you're super intentional with what you're feeding yourself, with who you're trying to be and what you are trying to do. And again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Heated Conversations. We'll see you guys in the next episode.